Hi, friends. I am so excited for today's episode of Smallbizwhiz. I have a wonderful guest that I cannot wait to share with you all. This is Miss Julie Ryan. She is a psychic medium and medical intuitive. She can sense what medical conditions and illnesses a person has and can facilitate energetic healing. She can communicate with spirits, both alive and dead. Julie always says she is a buffet of psychicness, which I love, and can even scan animals, access people's past lives, and she can tell how close to death someone is. She has a wonderful book, which I have read. It's called Angelic Attendants, and it explains what really happens when we transition from one life to the next. Um, Julie has several other books. She is heard by millions all over 100 countries throughout the world. She is also a very successful businesswoman, an inventor, in addition to being an author, a podcaster herself, and a serial entrepreneur. Everybody, please welcome my special guest, Miss Julie Ryan.
Oh, what a delight to be with you. I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome, Julie. So, I started listening to your podcast a while back. They are just amazing. I love that you have guests that you can scan. A lot of people have asked, oh, I have a family member that's not quite feeling right. And it's just amazing how you can read these people. So, maybe first explain to our listeners what a medical intuitive is and how you got where you are doing this.
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Medical intuitive, I never heard that term before. I read it about 30 years ago
Uh-huh.
in a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mays, and she called herself a medical intuitive. And I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world and a former manufacturer of them. And I thought, what the heck is that? And so I looked into it. And back then, we didn't have the internet yet. So I went to a bookstore and found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan, who talked about parlaying very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English and utilizing those for healing. It was way quantum physics. I mean, you say that to me about breakout hives. That's way above my pay grade. I'm like, okay, I know how to spell it, but that's about it. And so I learned that utilizing energy with our bodies as kind of an energy generator, Andrea, is just going to help us um, facilitate healing for other people. So I learned how to do this. I studied it for 6 years. Now I teach people all over the world how to do it in a weekend. And once we connect with spirit, we can do it all. It's I don't understand why it's siloed into you got the medical intuitives and you got the pet psychics and you got all that kind of stuff. So medical intuitive to me is I hook into somebody energetically. It takes me a nanosecond, turn my radar on and off. I don't walk around with it. And once I hook into somebody, then I have a hologram of them in my mind's eye. I always get their permission first. If it's somebody with whom I'm speaking or somebody that I'm with just in person, they'll get that because they're asking me to do it. So I have their permission. If somebody's asking me to scan like their mom or their child, I'll always ask that person's permission telepathically. And then I envision shooting energy from their feet up through the top of their head. And it's as if I'm looking at an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI. And I can see in my mind's eye broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, whatever. I have a friend right now who's in the hospital and they're saying that she has cancer in her lungs and her liver and all these other areas. And so I scan her and I go, you don't have cancer, you got mold. It's just showing up as a shadow on the CT scan. This is not cancer. This is a fungal infection. Turns out she's got mold in her home. So I'm able to detect that. And then the healings take the place of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time that emulate what I saw in surgery for all those years when I was developing products, testing prototypes, training doctors and reps and staff in the hospitals. And sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And so I'm really descriptive with my client, or like you mentioned, if on my call-in show Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, Ask Julie Ryan. It's a blast, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really descriptive because when the person can envision what I'm talking about in the healing, and my analogies, as you know, are sometimes really hilarious,
They
but
are.
they're intended from spirit working through me and with me to help us have a human frame of reference for this energy healing that's happening. And so I always say, I want you to envision what I'm describing because the body's going to follow what the brain's showing it. So it's really fun. It's complementary to Eastern and Western medicine as we know it. I believe it's part of the healing equation. And so it's a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you're saying, I mean, I believe it really does complement Eastern and Western medicine, and it gives people a different aspect to look at their health. Just like you're telling this friend of yours, it might not necessarily be this, it might be this. Look into this. I feel like almost all the time it is mold. I mean, I feel like people are full of mold. I feel like that's why they're always sick. And so it's
Yeah.
really good to get a different opinion and learn more than one angle. So, and I've been able to listen to you do that on your show, and I absolutely love it. I hear you talk to people from all over the country with different issues. You and I have talked. I've been on the show maybe once or twice, and it was just the information. I left better than I went into the show. So I'm hoping today we'll be able to do that for our guest that's going to show up a little bit later in the show. So, the book, Angelic Attendants.
Yeah.
So, everybody, I happened to listen to this book on Audible during a drive one day, and it was absolutely amazing. Julie, you painted a picture, a human picture for us to be able to better understand death. And once I heard it and understood it, it made so much more sense. I was like, oh, that's what was going on at the time with my grandma in hospice care. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, she was kind of looking in the sky. Oh, she kind of had her hands up. Like, okay, so she was, talking to people. So, talk to me about your book and the 12 phases of transition for us. Paint a picture for our listeners about your book.
Well, Angelic Attendants was designed to just take the fear out of end of life because there's lots of information out there about the afterlife and about the phases of grief, but not much about what happens as somebody's dying. And what I perceive, Andrea, is that we're all surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as we're transitioning. And when you were with your grandmother, if she perhaps said something to somebody who'd been dead for decades,
Right.
and we all think, oh, it's the morphine, grandma's just hallucinating. No, she's not.
Right.
She's actually seeing those deceased loved ones' spirits that are there. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee, and they're there to assist and to help the person as they're transitioning into heaven. That's what I call non-physical is heaven. And so it's really a glorious component to a situation that oftentimes is a heart-wrenching
Yeah.
experience for us, especially the first time we go through that with a loved one, because not only are we afraid for them, but we're afraid for ourselves because we're thinking, oh, I'm going to be there someday. What's going to happen? May I share the story about how this all came about?
Absolutely.
When my mother was dying in 2002, I'd been studying woo woo for a while at that point, and I don't know, maybe 10 years, not quite. And I started seeing these spirits in the room. Like my grandmother was the first one to show up, and she had died 6 months earlier. And all these angels and all these other family members who were deceased, and then a lot of people that I didn't know. And our dogs from when I was a kid, they were there, and other dogs that I had seen pictures of that my mother had, other animals that my mother had had growing up. So it, on one side, it was heart wrenching. I was grieving the loss of my mother because it was sudden. I just got a call on a Friday night and she died
Oh,
Saturday morning.
oh,
We drove through the night, Friday night, and got there a 9 hour drive at, I don't know, 9 the next morning or something.
oh.
And at the same time, there was a glorious component, as I mentioned, to it. And I was watching it with wonder and going, okay, these extra angels have shown up. I know they're going to be part of the equation. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to be interesting to watch. And so that's what I talk about in the 12 phases. And in short, the maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying is there first. And she runs the show from the spirit world, which surprised me. I thought God probably had some air traffic control department in heaven that was dispatching angels or something like that. But no, it's the maternal spirit. We mothers think we're done raising our kids when they're all grown and have their own kids. Yeah, we're not. We're even helping them from heaven, from beyond the grave. And then they're joined by the paternal spirit that's closest to the person who's dying. So in my case, my father's deceased. He would be there. If he was still alive, it would be my maternal grandfather. So
Mhm,
always on the maternal line,
mhm,
which is interesting. We can talk about that more in a minute. And then they bring in this group of angels and they form a circle around the person who's dying. Now, I'm a Catholic girl that went through 12 years at Catholic schools. And so the angels appear to me how I was taught they look.
okay.
Big wings, white gown, barefoot, rope belt, that kind of a thing. Is that what angels really look like? That's what they look like to me because they're going to show up in a way that I'm going to be able to recognize them. To somebody that grew up perhaps in an indigenous culture in the Amazon, angel energy may just look like a purple blob
Yeah.
of energy. It's all going to be based on, what we've been taught certain things look like. And then as the person's approaching death, that circle opens up from the top and it forms a horseshoe and then eventually a straight line across the bed. And it's interesting to note that this transition, these 12 phases of transition, happen regardless of whether somebody dies instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether they die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, years, even.
Mhm,
Let's say somebody that has Alzheimer's, that kind of a thing. Because time doesn't exist in the spirit world, time's a human creation.
right.
A couple of interesting nuances. Number one, about phase 9-ish, the spirit exits the body in stage one, phase one, and it looks like a speech bubble in a cartoon,
Mhm,
where the character's thoughts or words are what they're saying. And about phase 9, there are two extra angels that show up. Phase 6, they show up on either side of the spirit bubble. And then phase 9, their wings start to move. And it reminds me of a giant owl.
mhm.
Their wings are very smooth, they're rhythmic. Most of the time, they're slow. You can almost feel the drag that an owl's wings would cause. And they're massive. And that's what this reminded me of. Well, as these wings began to move with my mother, they formed a vortex above my mother's head. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. Wonder what's going to happen here. And I could feel the vortex forming.
Mhm.
I could feel an upward pull, like a suction, like when you're in the car wash and you're driving through at the end and they turn on the dryer and it's sucking all the
Yeah.
water off the car. I could feel that. I could see it and I could hear it. And I thought that was so interesting. And eventually it helped the spirit, in this case, my mother's spirit, exit through this vortex, through the tunnel
Mhm.
that we hear a lot from near death experiencers. And then they're escorted to heaven with these angels on either side. The interesting thing about the vortex and the owl's wings, when I was writing the book, I thought, well, I'm just going to see what comes up. I was led to do an internet search. Come to find out, there's this thing called the wingtip vortex, which is an
Whoa.
aeronautical engineering phenomenon that everything that flies, every jet, every plane, every bird, every bug, every kite, there's there are these vortices that form underneath the wings and they cause lift. And I thought, holy schmoly,
Yeah.
these angels are causing this situation that if you do a search on it online,
Mhm.
there are thousands of aeronautical engineering drawings and articles and whatever about the wingtip vortex. And I thought, holy Moses, that is amazing that that was happening. Two other interesting things about this. University based research shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets. 90%.
Right.
So grandma's not hallucinating. Grandma can actually see her mother who died when your grandmother was 5 and
Mhm.
she's been dead for 90 years. Yeah, she's really seeing her. Number 1. And number 2, back to the Catholic thing. At the end of every Roman Catholic funeral, there's a prayer said or sung called In Paradisum, which is Latin for into paradise.
Mhm.
And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise.
Mhm.
So when I was writing the book, I did some research and learned that it originated as a 5th century Gregorian chant. And I thought, well, maybe it took till the 5th century until somebody was well educated enough because, people were illiterate.
Yeah.
Somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly some of the most well educated people were men
Mhm.
living in monasteries and
Mhm.
synagogues. And so I believe that people have been able to see this since the beginning of time.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is very, very true. Now, what about the people who aren't necessarily Catholic? I mean, we're all Catholics here in New Orleans, but I mean, is this necessarily a Catholic religion thing, or is this just a spirituality belief?
Great question. I've never been asked that before. Great question. It's everybody. It happens to everybody. And my book, Angelic Attendants, is given out for everybody that comes in to plan a funeral at my parish, at my church. It's given out in many, many churches and synagogues throughout America. And as we're translating it into different languages, it's happening in the same way. And oftentimes the family will be given the book as their loved one is in the end phases of life. So, may I share another just quick story about how I was led to even write the book,
Please,
which is
yes.
kind of a fun story. One day I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me, and I'm laying on a massage table. I got a blankie on, I got my pillow under my head. And when she's doing a healing on me, my loved one's spirits are in the room. They line both sides of the table. Even my dog Katie, her little paws are up on the side of the table, which is a riot. So one day this dead Pope spirit shows up. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, okay, I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he laughed and he said, well, I was number 6. And I said, well, how may I help you? Like, why are you here? And he said, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies because it's been so bastardized over the millennia and people are scared to death, pardon the pun, to die. And there's nothing to be afraid of. It's glorious. And you know
Yeah,
that because
yeah.
you've seen it lots and lots of times. So you just need to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. And he said, yeah, 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 yeah. Just get on with it. And so we went back and forth a little bit. And then I just didn't think anything more of it till I got in the car getting ready to leave. And Susan, my mentor, could see this Pope too, this dead Pope. Had his Pope hat on, the shepherd's rod, the whole 9 yards. And I got in the car and I did an internet search on Clement the Sixth.
Mhm.
Well, come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague. when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dead and his prayers for the dying. And I thought, Ryan, you can't make this stuff up.
No.
So it took me another several years before I got the golden ovary courage. Guys have breast balls, girls have golden ovaries.
Yeah.
And I got the courage to really put myself out there with this. And it's just been an amazing ride ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I feel like I remember reading about that. Have you also come across some other celebrities that have passed away that maybe you've communicated with? Have any other reached out to you?
Celebrities like dead popes or
Um,
celebrities like,
I'm trying to think. I feel like I read about in the book somebody reached out to you, or maybe I heard it on the podcast, a dead
yeah, yeah.
celebrity.
Yeah, 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 we just released one because we release 4 shows a week
Hmm.
on the YouTube channel and 3 on the podcast network that's on every podcast network that's available. And we had a guest on recently who was reincarnated as she was Joe DiMaggio
Mm.
reincarnated.
Hmm.
That's what you're thinking of
Hmm.
maybe. And we talked about Joe DiMaggio being married to Marilyn Monroe. And so that was interesting when I was interviewing her because 3 of our shows are interview shows.
Hmm.
And then one is the call in show every Thursday night, which is, as I mentioned, really fun. They're all really fun, but it's fun to hear about different people's near death experiences and if they're mediums or healers, how they do it. Because everybody has their own way. There's not a right way or a wrong way. And we all have the ability
Right.
to do this. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. And that's what I teach people how to do in live classes. The next one's November 1st through the 3rd in Atlanta in person. And then we do them online too. And so everybody has the ability. It's just a matter of if you're interested, it's transfer of energy.
Right. And it's just like they say, kids can always sense things and sense spirits and things like that. And then I think as they grow and become adults, we either get too busy or we have a phone in our hand or we're watching the TV and we get distracted. Things
Mhm.
cloud our third eye. I've
Right.
always kind of noticed. But everybody, I believe, truly, truly has the ability. I find when you're very vulnerable, whether or not you want, in my own experience, that's when they come to, when you're in a vulnerable
Yeah.
spot.
Sometimes. Well, and you bring up a really good point about kids because kids up to the age of about 7 or so, it's been my experience, they can see spirits. They can communicate with them. They don't know that there's anything special about it.
Right.
It's just second nature to them. You'll see babies,
Mhm.
looking up in the corner like they're watching somebody in the room. You'll see pets.
Yes.
Yeah, you'd be watching TV at night and your dog's like moving its head like it's watching somebody walk across the room and you can't see anybody, but they're seeing them. And so when that happens at our house, I'm turning on my radar going, okay, who's here? How can I help you? What do you want?
Yeah. That
Kind of a
that
thing.
that's so funny. I have it on video. We had a miniature pinscher, my husband and I, and this dog had quite a personality. One day he was just sitting on the bed. It was me and him, nobody else. And the dog just starts looking up, turning around, like his eyes were following something. Then he started
Right.
growling. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I got to get the camera out. I have got to record this for my husband to see because if not, like nobody's going to believe me.
Right.
And so I actually just came across that video. It's probably 5 or 6 years old. And I came across it the other day on my phone and I was just like, oh my gosh, like all my dogs, they are always seeing stuff. They're always looking behind me. I get so
Yeah.
nervous. I'm like, what do you see
Yeah.
behind me?
Well,
And
and security cameras pick up a lot of spirit activity too, and
yeah,
they look like orbs on the camera. There are many, many people that have told me over the years that their security system they'll get a notice because there'll be something like there's an intruder. They're picking up energy, the laser beams, that go through
Yeah.
the house, they're picking up energy. And when they run back the film, it's just orbs in the room. Well, those orbs are all spirits.
Right.
And if you take a still photo of them and you put it on your desktop and you blow it up, a lot of the time you can see a face in there, which is really cool when you think about that.
Oh, that's so cool. And being in New Orleans, I have so many pictures, Julie, from the French Quarter. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go and take a picture, we used to do that all the time, especially after Hurricane Katrina, once the city was being rebuilt. It was all locals in the French Quarter. A lot of tourists weren't really coming. And so we would take pictures in front of famous establishments and things like that, and we would see the orbs. I do have a special guest, Rachel. Julie, I'm going to just let you organically take over this conversation with our guest today.
Okay. All right. So, Rachel, how I do this is there something that you would like to discuss? Do you have a medical situation going on? Would you like to talk to a deceased loved one? Do you want to do a past life scan? What are you interested
Well,
in?
over the last year, I have had two what I call soul animals pass away. Um, so I would be curious if either of
Hmm.
them had anything to say to me.
Okay. What are
Charlie
their
and Tyson.
names
I
about
got
them?
Tyson when I was 19. He's a
Is he a
dog.
dog or
He
a
was a
cat?
big 85-pound Dutch Shepherd, gentle giant.
Oh, wow.
It's
What's a
like
Dutch Shepherd? What's the difference between a Dutch Shepherd and
so
a German Shepherd?
he. It's not quite as fluffy, and he was a black brindle color. So still kind of that working dog look, like Belgian Malinois. I don't think I'm saying that correctly, but so he kind of looked like that too. That slimmer trim,
Wow.
less fluffy.
Okay. Yeah. And how about
Charlie
Charlie?
is a cat, and I got her 2 years after I got my dog, and she is was a gray cat with a white mustache, and I call her my impulse buy because I was buying dog food
Oh,
and they had the adoption cages all set up, and I saw her in the kennel and I was like, okay, well, this is a cat with a mustache. This is practically an investment. We'll get her an Instagram account and she'll buy her own food. But yeah, so she was my impulse buy, and they became really close. Which is funny because she was the 6-pound
yeah.
cat and he's 85-pound dog, but they both passed away from the same cancer, almost diagnosed on the same day, a year apart. Um, so there was and there was tons of
Wow.
things like that just happened. So I have my own spiritual ideas to why things went down the way they did. Um, but I would just love to know if they have any messages because, of course, that's traumatic for anyone to go through. But then just seeing so many
Yeah.
spiritual connections between them,
Yeah.
just, I don't know, it's a lot. It's beautiful and I see the beauty in it, but in the moment there was a lot of worry and concern.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Well, the first thing when they were talking about being together and that they died closely within one right after the other, is that it's a good thing because your baby would eat the dog food.
That's funny.
What was the first thing they said? That if you had
That's
the
funny.
dog food like in a bowl, your baby would wanna eat it. So that was pretty funny, and they do. My grandkids, when they were I have 5 grandsons through marriage, and when they were baby they'd all eat that dried dog food, which was hilarious.
That's so funny.
They'd crawl up to it and eat it. I'd be like, "Oh my god." First time the first one did it, my husband about, just gagged, and I said, "There's nothing in there that's gonna hurt them. It's just
Yeah.
protein." So that was number 1 that they said. The other thing is, yeah, they're together all the time. They said that the thing that caused their cancer was overexposure of EMFs.
Okay.
So, where did you live? Did you live near power lines? Did you have EMFs in the room where they hung out the most? Most of us
Of
have Wi-Fi in
course.
our
Yeah.
homes, but
They I mean, we definitely have Wi-Fi in their homes. The litter box and her food was, I'm trying to think if it was in the room. No, it was okay. The house that we all lived mostly together, the Wi-Fi was in the middle of the room, so we were all exposed to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was too much for them, the EMFs. So you probably want to turn off your Wi-Fi at night just to give them a break. And then you think about they're on the
Hmm.
floor, right? They're walking on the floor, and so they do get some grounding when they go outside. Did
Yeah,
Charlie go outside ever, or was
Charlie's
Charlie
just
just an
inside.
inside cat? Yeah. Okay, so she didn't have the opportunity to ground in the grass or on the ground like it's so important for all of us to do. At least get a grounding pad that you can put your feet on while
Yeah.
you're on the computer if possible. But that's the thing that came in. That was the cause of their cancer was too high of exposure to
Okay.
EMFs. Wait, is there a cell
Oh, I'm
tower close
sure.
by your
Especially like
house?
the 5G towers. I'm trying to pay attention to them because they're starting to pop up more and more. And I live in Baton Rouge in the city,
Mhm.
close to the capital. So also
Yeah,
around all those chemical plants
right.
and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a
Hmm.
nuclear power plant
Yeah.
there too,
It's,
right?
yeah.
In Baton Rouge. And how I know that is my girlfriend's husband used to work
Yeah.
there. So, yes, I'm psychic, but I have more knowledge than that. And yeah, there's definitely some stuff going on there that you want to just shield your family from that. There's a company called Leela Quantum, Leela Quantum, that has devices that we have in our home, and it's kind of like a tower, Rachel, and it will negate EMF exposure to the body of humans and pets for a radius depending on how big the
Is it, we're
tower
talking
is
about like
that
a
you buy.
pyramid?
It's, I mean, it's like a little tower. It's a two
Hmm.
plates. Um, and in like the one that I have in the central part of our house, it'll cover 2,500 square feet. And then they have these little capsules that have little beads in them. And people that are in the broadcasting industry, like the sports guys that are in trucks, at the NFL stadiums and LSU and the college stadiums and stuff like that. There's so many EMFs in there because they're hooked up to satellite and they got like 50 computers in them and thousands of wires coming out of them. And so I have several clients that are in that industry, or they're roadies for a band, and so they're setting up all the speakers and doing all
Hmm.
those wires and everything. And these little capsules, I say, either wear them around your neck or put them in your pocket. When you
Okay.
fly, too, we're exposed to a lot of EMFs when we fly, and those guys are on the road a lot, and they're flying a lot, and that will help negate what the circumstances are. But your pets are saying that they want you to know that it's EMF exposure. So for you to do some things to negate the
Yeah. And
exposure
are
for you and your
earthing
family.
mats and earthing shoes, is that a similar? Because I have recently been looking at things like that because they make mats for your bed and pillowcases and all sorts of things.
Right. Right. Yeah, they're really good, but you don't even have to buy anything. Just
Yeah.
go out and stand barefoot in the grass or on dirt or on cement if it's on the ground. Like if you have a raised cement, something that
Hmm.
isn't on the ground, you don't want to stand on
And
that because it needs
yeah,
to, you're grounding. You want it
totally.
to be on the ground. Uh, if you're going down to the beach, you want to put your feet in the sand. That mud in the Mississippi, the
Mhm.
dirt along the Mississippi where you are, same thing. You can walk along the I
Yeah.
don't know that you
Well,
wanna
not in
walk in
Mississippi mud,
mud, but
but
you might you might want to, but yeah. So, those kinds of things. Yeah, but they're with you all the time, and, They're talking about your
It's
baby eating
so
dog food
wild
for the
because he
second
never
time.
tried to. And even the cats, he gives them their treats, but he never tries to eat them himself. So
Yeah,
I
well, it may
hope
be
not.
coming. It may be coming. Yeah. So do you leave the dog food
When
out?
Tyson, we don't have any dogs anymore. So when Tyson was in his senior years, I was leaving it out because he wasn't eating it all in one sitting. It was taking him longer, and I didn't want to just pick it
Right.
up. Um, so I was
Yeah.
for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what they're talking about. It's the latter. It's they help send an animal to you. I've asked this so many times. Do spirits reincarnate? Do our animal spirits reincarnate as other animals that come back to us? And I get a no when I hear that. Will you be reunited with them? Yes, as you're dying, and yes, when you're in heaven again. But as far as um, the animals coming back, no, you have other animals that will be as cherished by you and your family and will be guides of some point, at some point to you, like these two were. But I've heard no so many times, but I always ask, in case it changes. But I always get a no on that. People reincarnate all the time. Oh, yeah, yeah. But it's animals in particular, I get no when I ask spirit about that. But yeah, yeah, people, we can get information. Like, yeah, we get information oftentimes from past life scans that we can validate and corroborate with historic documents online. And so I always say, you can make this stuff up because your name was Joe Schmo and you were a colonel in the Union Army, and here's where you were stationed, and we can find it in the historic records. Yeah, and here's your dog tag number. Yeah, it's wild. Really fun, really fun.
Cool. Well, Rachel, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that at least you got a little bit of feedback regarding your babies. And I appreciate you stopping. All
Oh,
good, sis.
nice to meet you too, my girl. Give that baby a hug. Keep him away from the dog food.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, Julie. I am finding the more that I'm doing my soul searching and such, it feels like animals do not reincarnate, but I feel like they send you your next animal. Does that make
I
sense?
agree.
They
I
pick them.
agree. Absolutely. And I think our love deceased loved ones help with that too. I think there's a kind of a group effort in that.
Yeah, there's definitely no coincidences when it comes out to where we get our babies from. I totally
Right.
believe that.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting question regarding terminal lucidity. So,
Yeah.
for those who may not necessarily know what that is, it's basically the end of life rally, right? So, when somebody is close to passing away, they may not necessarily be able to talk or speak or communicate. However, the that rally where they get their last rally where they can talk, they might be able to eat. Some might, if you're at home, they might get up and cook a meal. So it's terminal lucidity. And then they pass shortly after. So it's kind of like a little tease. We might think in our human souls that they're getting better, and then
Mhm.
they actually pass away. My question is, does that happen in animals as well? Have you ever heard of an animal having a terminal lucidity moment before their death?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. My dog Katie did.
Okay.
Yeah, she got better. She seemed to get better the night before we took her to euthanize her, and I thought, "Am I doing the right thing here? Is this really what we're supposed to be doing?" And I was getting a yes. She had a, neck injury
Hmm.
from another dog in the neighborhood. She was in so much pain. And my son came in from LA. My husband was out of town and he said, "Mom, what are you doing? She's in so much pain." And I think she rallied because he was home. really. And then we took her. Oh, that was one of the most excruciating things I've ever been through. It was just, oh, heart wrenching.
I know that sounds
Yeah.
so sad. That's so you
Yeah.
think she rallied for your son, like when
I
he
do.
got home? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I had an experience like that, and I was kind of thinking about it with one of my babies, and I was bringing him to be euthanized. It was in my mind, I felt like it was time. Well, the next
Mhm.
thing I know, we get to the vet and we're consulting with the vet back and forth, back and forth. This was a new vet because I was going to euthanize. And he's I started telling the vet, I'm like, look, I I'm having some second thoughts about this. The dog is walking around. He's being social to everybody. He's, sniffing hands and they're giving him treats and everything. And I'm like, I'm having second thoughts about that. And the doctor is like, well, we can try some medication. We can, if you think we want to try this, if you think we want to try that. I'm like, I just couldn't euthanize him in that moment because I just kept telling the vet, I can't euthanize a dog that's up and walking around the room and being social and going to check out all the other people. And I had to I took him home because I wasn't convinced. And then he had actually had a stroke the next day. And so
No.
and so I was like, okay, I didn't realize he had a stroke. I brought him back to the vet and they were like, yeah, he had a stroke. So we did end up saying our goodbyes to him. But when I tell you that dog tricked me, I was like, I don't know what to do. I mean, it really, really messed with me. And I knew about, the last rally in humans, but I never had seen that with another animal. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he,
I think it's more common than not.
wow, very, very interesting. Um,
Do you want tell us a story about the French Quarter? And then I want to tell you the one about the myrtles burned to
okay.
her earlier.
Okay, I'm gonna try and catch my breath for this. So I was going to look at a house. It was in Lakeview, New Orleans, right after Hurricane Katrina. I was already in Lakeview, which was where we had a lot of damage, Julie. That's where the one of the levees had broke, and
Mhm.
the city just had a really, really different vibe after that. Um, so we went to look at this house to move into. And I all of a sudden got really, really winded and very, very faint and weak. And something made me pass, like almost pass out, but didn't pass out. But like I couldn't stand up. I'm like, I need to sit down. I started leaning on the wall outside. There was a balcony. So let me paint a picture. There's a balcony on the first floor, and then there's a balcony on the second floor. So it was a double. They had like a 3 bedroom downstairs, 3 bedroom upstairs. And when I got really winded and weak, I felt like something just took all of the energy out of my body. And for some reason, I felt like an antebellum type person. I don't know. I'm like, I feel like we're in some kind of wartime. It was on Orleans Avenue. So there's a body of water. And I'm like, I almost feel like ships should have been passing by. I can't tell you if this was a vision, a feeling. I don't know. My body went limp and it was very weird. Something took all of my energy. Some entity just sucked out all of my energy. I will never forget that feeling in 2006 in Lakeview, New Orleans area. And
Yeah.
it was eerie. It was very eerie, but
Mm.
I felt like something took me back to a different time,
Mhm.
you know?
That was your spirit that took you back to a different time. So what I'm getting from that, the first thing I got when you first started telling me about it was that there was a serious mold problem in that house.
Probably.
And so you were not supposed to go in there because it was going to make you really sick.
Mm.
So that was number one to keep you out of the house. And when you let down your guard on that, and then you were seeing the antebellum time and all of that, that it was, in fact, you were back in that time. And so it gave you the opportunity to look at it and just you were kind of in a different reality because the mold, and I've experienced that where I felt like I was going to pass out. I was in a restaurant in Florida that had been flooded during one of the hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked good from the outside. It was an old restaurant, but obviously there was so much mold in there. And I had to leave. I couldn't stay in the lobby.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. And so you were kind of in that in between time of this reality and another reality, and it was you were changing vibrations. It's kind of like you're going into a dream state when you're kind of half awake, half asleep. You were doing that, but it was just because of the mold exposure. So you were able to see what was happening. There weren't any other spirits sucking your energy. All
Oh.
spirits are pure love. There's none of that. We get that from the horror movies and the Anne Rice novels,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of New Orleans and all of that. But no, this was a physiological response I get that puts you into kind of that in between, kind of like in the mornings before you're completely awake, you're in that twilight zone
Yeah.
almost as you're waking up. That's the time when I get a lot of what I call divine downloads. I've gotten whole business plans downloaded
Wow.
into my head, just boom, 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 boom. And it's called the hour of God,
Mm-hmm.
like from 3 to 5. I had a guy on the show named Clark Strand, and he talks about that's when the veil between our
Yes.
human experience and the spiritual experience is the thinnest,
Mm-hmm.
and we can communicate more easily with spirit. A lot of people during that time. What I believe, it's been my experience, is that when we all go to sleep, our bodies rest, our brains rest, and we go back to the factory preset vibrational level of spirit, which is our normal level. And then during the day, we're busy and we're with our families and doing our jobs and doing whatever. And so we're not in that vibration of spirit. It's like we're tuned to the human channel instead of the spirit channel. But after our brains have had a chance to rest and we all go back to that spirit level frequency, then we have the opportunity to do that. I believe that's what happened to you. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. It
Okay.
absolutely does.
And I do believe that that was your spirit and your spirit guides and your guardian angel and deceased loved ones and all of them going, don't go into this house. This is going
Yeah.
to make you sick, girl. Stay out of that house. You don't need to buy it. And they needed something that was going to be really dramatic for you because you would have rationalized it.
Yeah.
Had you gone in and really liked the house, you would have said, oh, we can do remediation or whatever. But I'm not sure that that house was even fixable.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So there was that. Yeah. May I share a
Oh,
story about a plantation down near you?
please do. Yes.
There's a place in I think it's St. Francisville.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of near between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. A little bit
and
past Baton Rouge. Yeah.
past Baton Rouge then. And it's called the Myrtles.
Yes.
And so I was in there with a bunch of girlfriends. I had my 40th birthday party 25 years ago in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 of my best girlfriends flew in from all over the country and we just had a ball. I had sweets and we just had so much fun. So on one of our outings, we went to the Myrtles, which is this plantation that's supposedly haunted. Well, this is 25 years ago. I had just started learning woo-woo stuff and I could see some stuff, but not like today that I've gotten proficient at it. And back then, we didn't have phones with cameras. We had regular cameras. We had digital cameras, but we
Yeah.
didn't have a camera on our phones. We just had those flip phones,
Yes.
the old fashioned ones.
Yeah.
So they have this big mirror, as most antebellum homes did, right when you walk in the front door in the foyer. And it's so the women could check to be sure that their ankles weren't showing with their
Yes.
hoop skirts and their long dresses, because that was just taboo.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid your ankles were showing. And in the mirror, the tour guide said, we've changed out this glass in this mirror just umpteen times. And there's always these children's handprints that show up in the mirror. And it's one of the things about the Myrtles that makes it haunted and nobody can explain it.
Mhm.
So we took a picture of the mirror, went on with the tour, that kind of stuff. Well, after that trip, one of my girlfriends had the roll of film developed and there were handprints in the picture from the camera that she used, the digital camera. We couldn't see it with the naked eye. It was there. Oh my gosh, just, up front and center. And with those pictures, she sent them to me and she said, "Look at this." So it was really cool.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of pictures from the Myrtles, and that stuff is amazing. I've actually been to the Myrtles myself. My mother, who's very brave, she spent the night there. They have like some
Oh,
little cottages, and she didn't really have any experience, but I don't know that she was necessarily ready or open
yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
But I went, and then it caught on fire the next day. So
Oh
I'm gonna
no.
I'm gonna try and stay away from the Myrtles.
Oh no.
But
Well,
no.
I was just in Ireland
Mhm.
weekend before last, and I was in an 800-year-old castle,
Oh,
which
wow.
was way cool with a
Yes.
drawbridge and a moat and on a loch, which is just Irish for lake.
Mhm.
I didn't see any monsters, but I did see fairies in the woods.
Really?
I did. It was really cool. They had this road and there were woods on either side of the road. And so I stopped kind of in this little turnout. I was on a walk by myself
Mhm.
and it was in the morning and I stopped and I said, "Okay, you guys, come out and say hi. I know you're here, the fairies." And they did, and they looked like Tinkerbell. And
Okay.
then the male ones, and they were kind of flitting around me. And then there were some that were on the ground that were in a circle, and they were kind of dancing around me. But the funny thing is, the male ones looked like little leprechauns. You know how they were dressed in their little suits.
Mhm.
And is that what they really look like? That's how they look to me because that's how I can identify what that energy is.
Right.
But that was really fun to be able to see that.
I've seen some videos, I feel like, with fairies. I haven't really researched it that much, but I've definitely seen and heard people talking about fairies, which,
Yeah.
they might be, are they kind of like a spirit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're spirits, and they're some people call them elementals. So
Oh, yeah. Elementals. Okay.
they're in that category. I'm not sure what that category is. I think it's just kind of um, spirits that are maybe not quite as sophisticated as others, although they were cute because they were talking to me and I said, "I'm so glad you guys came out to say hi." And they said, "Well, we knew you could see us."
There you go.
So again, being on that spirit frequency.
Yeah.
And then I heard, "You're magic like us." And I said, "Oh, what a sweet thing to say." They said, "Well, you are." And there was this little chirping noise that I heard, kind of almost like a baby bird, but fainter
Mhm.
than that. And then it got louder as more and more of them came out.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is about an American archaeologist who was walking down the street in Dublin, and he was just asking people that he was passing, and he said, "Do you believe in fairies?" And this one woman said, "No, sir, I do not, and they're everywhere." Which I thought was hilarious. They have
Wow.
fairy trees over there that'll be in the middle of a field,
Yeah.
and they're these bushes with big old thorns, and these farmers will plow around them. I mean,
Mhm.
they never cut those down ever.
Mm-mm.
I don't know that they live in them. I get it. I just heard a yes, but yeah,
That's what I was
it's that
thinking because they
that
live in
ancient
them.
culture. Well, and all that voodoo in New Orleans, that those ancient cultures and beliefs and folklore and all of that are so fascinating.
It is, and it's still alive and well today, We have people that still practice voodoo here, and they make their, concoctions, and they swear that you'll fall in love if you have this potion, and hey, look, anything goes these days, whatever.
Well, and they're ancient.
Yeah.
Those practices are ancient, and every civilization has them.
Yes, they do.
And I see us as a species as humans moving closer to the spirituality thing. I think that it's much more readily acceptable today than it was certainly 50 years ago, or gosh, the Salem witch trials and the witch burnings and all
Mhm.
that stuff. It wasn't just here, but it was in Europe too
Right.
that happened. And those were the healers
I
doing that.
know. Right.
Yeah.
And I find that, people are starting to get, I want to say, normalize, um maybe not necessarily the voodoo. People are aware of it, but I find that people are starting to normalize being more spiritual, and they are normalizing death and dying. I know with myself, I'm trying to, teach my son that death and dying is totally normal, and we go to heaven, we have spirits, we have, and I think that's helped a lot with his grief because,
Yeah.
we've he's had to deal with some grief. We've lost 3 animals in a year due to old age and stuff. So I've had to explain, I have had to answer all the questions, especially when it's time to go to bed, Julie. That's when all the questions come up because 'cause they'll
Yeah,
do
that or in the
anything.
tub,
Yeah,
right? In the tub. Yeah,
yes.
same thing
Like,
when my
"Oh,
son was little. Well, that's why I wrote my children's books. I'll send you the
yes."
one, Angel Messages for Dogs and Angel Messages for Cats, and it explains to these little people that they have a spirit, they have a body, they chose you as their family because they knew you would love them, and all of that, and just makes it okay
Yeah.
for them to believe that. And I think that Catholics in particular do a really good job of helping little children. We're all taught about guardian angels and
Mhm.
the Holy Spirit and saints and all of that, the Virgin Mary and Jesus, of course, and God, and that they're all spirits,
Right.
right? The Holy Spirit. And
Right.
so it gives us a launch pad from which
Totally.
to jump into things that are more spiritual. And that's what religions are all designed to do. Sometimes they get off course with control, but that's how they were all originally designed.
Right, right. And they all believe in the afterlife, all of them, no matter what. So,
Right.
yeah. Well, Julie, if somebody wanted a free copy of your book, Angelic
Yeah.
Attendants, can you tell us where to go for that?
Right here, Angelic Attendants. I'm holding it up for those of you that are watching on YouTube. Angelic Attendants, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next, just go to julieryangift.com, or go on my main website, which is askjulieryan.com, and we'll send you a free digital and audiobook version of Angelic Attendants. So Pope Clement, he's on my case to eh, get this information out there. And I think, hey, a free book is a really good place to start.
It really is. And Julie, I'm telling you, you do a very good job at painting the picture for humans to understand because you use these comparisons that make it relatable. So I think
Yeah.
it's definitely a good read for everyone. I mean, death is inevitable. Everyone's going to go through it. We all know someone who has passed away. So this book is really for everybody.
Yeah.
And then we also have people that want to develop their intuition. So tell us a little bit about your course. I know you have one coming up, and people rant and rave about these courses.
They're really fun. Yeah, spirit's pure joy.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
Through the years, I've had people say to me, "You're just so flippant about this, and why aren't you more serious?" I said, "Because spirit's fun. We're supposed to have fun doing this stuff." Communicating with spirit. So, November 1st through the 3rd, Atlanta, Georgia, we're going to have an in person angelic attendant training. And everybody will learn how to do the buffet of psychicness, connect with spirits, anybody you want. If you know them or not, it's irrelevant. You can talk to your dead grandma. You can talk to Elvis. It doesn't matter. You just can talk to anybody you want, and then communicate with pets, communicate with people's spirits, both that are attached to a body and not, spirits of deceased loved ones and spirits of people. That's how I do my medical stuff, is I connect into the person's spirit, and then I'm like a human x-ray. So if they don't have to be deceased, in order for us to communicate with them. Past lives, how close to death is somebody, all that stuff, the medical stuff. And it's over a weekend and it's really fun. And then we have an online training that's just communicating with spirit and what happens as somebody's dying. And that's fun as well. So my show, Thursday nights, 8 p.m., Julie Ryan Show, Ask Julie Ryan show.com. And so that's a way to hook in. We also do the YouTube live stream. And so you can submit questions there. So I've got a team member on that's helping us with the questions. And then people that want to be on camera and have a conversation with me, they call in from all over the world. So that's why I say it's like being at the roulette table. I never know who's going to call or what their questions are going to be. But inevitably, people that listen to the show will write in and they'll say, I'm having the same situation. And by you talking to this person about a deceased loved one or a medical situation or a pet situation, I got my question answered and I felt like I got a healing. So,
Right. And it's
yeah.
very relatable because people all over the country are going through a lot of the similar things. That's why I listen religiously. I wait for that episode to come out on Friday morning
No.
because it's just, I love to hear that we're all going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And it is, and so I do get healing, even if I don't necessarily call in the show, if I just listen. But if you are looking for a good podcast, I really suggest go find Ask Julie Ryan and listen. She's got wonderful episodes. So
Oh,
Julie, thank
thanks.
you so much for joining
Oh,
us.
my delight. Thank you for having me. What a treat to get to spend this time with you and with all of your listeners.
Thank you so much. All right, friends. Small Biz Wiz is signing out. Bye.
Bye.